Welcome to the Hokie Hoops podcast. I am your host, Pete B, and we don't have Ed Williams here tonight, but I do have Mike McDaniel. Mike, how you doing?
What's going on, Pete? Busy Monday.
Yeah, busy Monday. We were just catching up a little bit about work, but always have time to talk some Hokie Hoops. We're going to get into the men and the women tonight. We're also going to talk a little bit about that Goodman tweet that hit the timeline around 9 a.m. and was talking about Mike Young and some NIL. So let's get to that at the end of the men's segment. But for now, we're going to start with them. On the last Two Deep episode, Ed came on with us and we kind of did a Hokie Hoops episode. So if you're looking for like last week's update, go to the most recent Two Deep episode and you'll find it there. But since then, we played Louisville and Syracuse, and both of those games were excellent basketball games. We fought really hard in both. We lost to Louisville and we beat Syracuse. But in that Louisville game, like, they're a top 25 team, arguably the second best team in the ACC. We didn't have Elijah Poteet, and we fought our way back into that game.
Yeah, real weird game, right? Because I think from Virginia Tech's standpoint, it's pretty clear, pretty apparent at this point. You're reading the press clippings and stuff like that. It's pretty apparent that some illness is going through the locker room, right? Jaden Schutt, clearly not right. Toby Lawal, clearly not right. Obviously, Toby didn't play against Syracuse, and he's dealing with an illness. Schutt's been hurt. No Elijah Poteet, totally unrelated issue. Bone bruise in his knee. We'll talk about him more when it comes to the Syracuse game because he was huge there. But yeah, it was pretty clear that Virginia Tech was playing at less than 100%. Now, you date back to earlier this year when this team was full health. They didn't look anywhere close to this good, right? And this was a situation where they were undermanned, or if guys were playing, they were clearly under the weather. And Tech loses to a really good tournament team by 5 points, right, at home. And I was really impressed with the performance defensively. Virginia Tech played very well guarding the perimeter in this basketball game.
Definitely.
The defense certainly kept them in it. I mean, it didn't feel like the shooting numbers are actually okay for Virginia Tech, but really for stretches of this game felt like Virginia Tech couldn't hit a shot. But then defensively, I thought really kept themselves in it against a very good Louisville team. Chucky Hepburn is a really tough cover. I thought for the most part, Virginia Tech kept him in check. I know he finished with 15 points. Ben Hammond made life really difficult on him, I thought, throughout the game. Just was all over him all night. He's just a really good player, and Louisville's a really good team. So I thought Tech showed well in this game, less than 100% against a good team. No excuses ever with Mike Young, right? He's just says, we didn't play well enough to win, but I was proud of how we hung in there. That's kind of been the story all year long, but I thought this was a pretty impressive performance considering the circumstances.
Yeah, midway through the second half, we had it tied at 55. We got down 7. It was like 67-60, and we rallied and got it to 67-66 with under 2 minutes left. And it's like, are we really going to pull this off? Because this would have been the highlight of the season, like the top 25 win that we never thought we'd get. And we turned it over a couple times down the stretch, couldn't close it out. And I would say up until that point, Rechsteiner had played maybe his best game of the season because he had 18 points, but there was a couple plays at the end where, in the post game, I'm like, he just undid all the good that he did in that game by like screwing it up. But like, I still think it was a step forward for him was the Louisville game.
Yeah, he's been playing better, right? He's been taking better care of the basketball by and large, which is why the closing stretch of the Louisville game was so unfortunate. Virginia Tech closes with 22 turnovers in this game, and the handful they had down the stretch were absolutely backbreaking.
It was 22. Oh my God.
20. It ballooned to 22, and it didn't really feel that bad until the closing minutes, right? And then it felt like there were several at one time, and that's kind of where this game got away from Tech. But yeah, the fact that Virginia Tech battled the way that it did offensively, I didn't feel like they had their best stuff, and they were able to kind of scrape things together because of how well they played defensively. It's a really encouraging sign, because I think when you look at this team this year and where they've shown the most growth, it's easy to be like, oh yeah, offensively, this team is like night and day to where they were in November. But I look at it kind of the flip side. I think defensively, this team has been pretty solid all year, and they've been playing their best basketball on that end of the floor here in the second half of the season. So
they really have been
really,
and that's something that a Mike Young team remember 2 years ago, we were like bitching and moaning about the defense. Like it was
Yep.
just terrible. I think one of the reasons it's better is that the athleticism, despite being young, the actual athleticism on the team is significantly better. I mean, you don't
Yep.
have to look further than Toby Lawal for some of that, but we didn't have him against Syracuse, but we still managed to defend reasonably well for a period of time. That's a little bit of a different story, but I agree with your overall point that the defense has been miles better than we've kind of gotten used to under Mike Young. And this year, with a lack of scoring, I mean, in the Louisville game, 42 points off the bench.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
know that our bench is kind of like fluctuating game to game, but Burnham had 13, Young had 11, Johnson had 12, 4, and 2 steals. And like I said, Rexsteiner with 18 points, but he also had 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and hit 4 of 7 from 3.
Yep.
And so Toby didn't play well. Poteet didn't play at all. And we managed to like stay with Louisville all the way to the end. It's just frustrating. Like if we had Poteet, maybe we win that game. But Wessler had 8 and 6 in 24 minutes. He added a block. We can talk a little bit more about him shortly.
Mm-hmm.
But the shooting from 3 was good in this game for us, and Louisville could not hit a bucket from deep, partially because of our defense, and we out-rebounded them as well. So not having Poteet and out-rebounding them and nearly beating them, it was a good effort, and it was probably a little bit of what happened to us in Boston, the 9 p.m. weekday start. Like we benefited from that for sure, but nevertheless, I thought like we punched up yet again, and we've done it so many times this year.
The point that you made about the athleticism defensively, I mean, it's been a while since we've had like multiple guys on the perimeter that are like plus on ball defenders. I mean, you look at what Tyler Johnson's done all year defensively. You look at how Ben Hammond has improved since really just gaining more minutes and taking over the starting role in most games. We'll talk about Syracuse in a second. In most games, taking over the starting point guard role. The on ball defense has improved, and then that's not even throwing in Toby, who is just an A++ athlete that Virginia Tech simply hasn't had, even on Virginia Tech's Sweet 16 team, right? It's really hard to point to a guy who was as athletic as Toby Lawal. I mean, jump out the gym like him. Nickeil Alexander-Walker was an NBA wing, right? And he's a good player.
Ahmed Hill was very athletic. Didn't always piece together the complete game, but a freak athlete for sure, but not quite like Toby.
Different kind of athleticism. Like Virginia Tech hasn't had the jump out the gym guy. Like Hill and Walker were rangy and very athletic. Lawal's just different, right? Like we haven't seen somebody jump like that. It's insane. So anyway, the athleticism defensively, I think, has made a big difference this year compared to the last couple of years where Virginia Tech's had a much higher offensive ceiling, but we've been screaming about the defense outside of Hunter Couture. Like this feels different now.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's talk about Syracuse then. We won 101-95 in overtime. I felt like it was a pretty even first half, but then we found ourselves down 9 at the break. Like sometimes you play a first half and you're like, man, we have no business being close in this game. This was the opposite. Like I felt like we were close, but the score really wasn't that close. And the Delaware transfer Davis was killing us, as well as Lampkin. Lampkin is a freaking load to deal with. And thank God Poteet was back for this game, because even though he had 16 points, I felt like Elijah was helping. 21 points for Davis on the other side. But in the second half, we got down by as much as 13 before going on a run and fighting our way back yet again. And it was Jaden Young. You know, his second half in overtime, I believe he had 23 points of his 26 in the last, 25 minutes. So he again stepped up. But I think at the end of the day, Ben Hammond was the story of this game.
Yeah, so a few things. Number one, Davis and Lampkin just absolutely torched Virginia Tech in the first half. There was just no answer, right? And then second half, defense was a little bit better. Things got tighter. They really struggled to get going in the second half. Big reason why Virginia Tech got themselves back into the game. Hammond's the story, right? Because of what he was able to do in the second half off the bench. Ends up with 21 points in 33 minutes. Jaden Schutt, a really good game. We just talked about him, being held scoreless in the Louisville game, comes back, scores 20, Jaden Young was unbelievable. And Jaden Young is doing this thing now where you're really starting to see the offensive ceiling, right? So what was it? 3 out of the last 4 games. He's, it's been 20 plus a couple times.
Yeah.
And, he had, I think, 13 or 14 in one of the other games. He's been good, right? And you see the offensive ceiling there. Without Lawal, you saw Tech really struggle defensively, which is why I think Elijah Petit's return was so crucially important. I thought he played very well in the second half. I thought Patrick Wessler gave Virginia Tech huge minutes.
Yeah.
Obviously, we can talk about the stretch in overtime where he blocks a shot, leads to a run out. It's really where Virginia Tech put the game away. I think it was Jaden Young who hit the bucket. It's just there are stretches and there are spurts, and it just felt like this game was almost like after seeing how Virginia Tech struggled against Louisville and seeing them not being able to really close the game, even with how this ended before overtime, like the end of regulation, how frustrating that was when Jaquan Carlos hit that 3 with like half a second left. This still felt like this was Virginia Tech's game to lose with how they played in the closing stretch. It was like, okay, they're figuring it out. It's about time they close a game like this against an opponent that has not been very good this year, but was playing very well in Castle on Saturday. So a satisfying win coming off of the Louisville loss.
And we just have not played Syracuse all that well since being in the ACC, especially up there. In Castle, it's been a little bit better. I think back to like Justin Robinson's big game against Syracuse many years ago. But that 3-pointer at the end of regulation was just typical Hokies basketball. Like, why does it always have to be like this? Like, come on, man. Can we just win this thing? But to their credit, they came out in overtime and played really well. And just to finish the point on Ben Hammond, it was 21, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, and 3 steals in a game. The only other player that's had that stat line is Del Curry for Virginia Tech. Like there was some, and I know there's a million of these stats out there, but to put that amount of stuff on the stat sheet, it's very unique and very exciting for a true freshman in Ben Hammond, who has gotten better and better. And this was his most efficient, best game of the season. And so that is incredibly exciting. We had 3 players with 20 plus, as we went over with Young, Hammond, and Shoot. And then 42% again from 3 in this one. We were 42% from 3 against Louisville, 42% here, 8 of 19, and 19 of 23 from the line. So we took care of our business where we needed to, because if any of those don't go in, we might not win this game. Like we needed those shots to go in, and the team has gotten increasingly better at shooting the basketball. Some of that's Jaden Young just becoming better because he takes a lot of shots. I mean, I think he took 20 shots in this game. So it wasn't his most efficient night, but like sometimes you need a guy to put the ball in the basket. And he's been doing that for us. And Ed liked him preseason, and he really struggled with his shot, whether it was getting comfortable or not being in the right rotations. I don't know, but it's coming along. And he is one of those microwave guys that, can shoot from the logo. And when it's going in, it's like, oh, damn, like this changes the scope of the offense for everyone when a guy can hit with range like that. So, and he went to the rim a bunch too. Like I've been impressed with him getting to the rim.
This is not he's not the same size as this guy, but this is a throwback that you'll really like, Pete. This is like Jarrell Eddy-esque. It's like when he's on, he's hitting a million threes in a row, and when he's off, you like don't want him to shoot. That's he's got a lot of late stage Jarrell Eddy in him. Thankfully for Virginia Tech, Jaden Young is only a sophomore, so he's got the ceiling. He's got untapped potential with the ceiling that we're obviously starting to see offensively.
Hey, Jarrell played in the NBA for a handful of seasons with the Wizards and maybe some other teams. He had more size than Jaden Young.
Yeah, like 6'9".
He was a big dude. But you're right. Like we're hoping that Young takes that next step and it becomes more consistent. Like just stay in the gym, stay shooting, and get more efficient. And because he's got a body that can, like, in terms of muscle mass, he can put more on.
Yep.
His shot can get better. Like there's a higher ceiling for him. And what he's doing right now is exciting. And you add in Johnson and Hammond. And I think this is a good segue to go to the Goodman tweet, because this is what he said. I'm putting it on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Virginia Tech head coach Mike Young is expected to return next season with an increased NIL package, sources told the Field of 68. Young made the NCAA tournament in 21 and 22, and the NIT the last 2 years. And it's 13 and 16 this year. Young will have more NIL resources next season to get their program back on track. Excuse me. So that's something that we've been hearing and kind of been assuming with the House case coming down. But for Goodman to kind of get a source and put this out there, it sounds like maybe some of the big time donors are like, what happened before was BS. And we need to make sure that we can, with the coaching acumen we have with Mike Young, we need to be supporting him better.
It's been really a couple of wasted seasons in that regard in terms of the NIL. Now, I've gone the soapbox before with pushing all your resources to football, rising tide lifts all ships. Like, I've been on that soapbox, but then it's really easy to pivot back when you see all those resources go into football and football be disappointing, like relative to expectations. I think it's clear, and I think it's becoming clear to donors, that Virginia Tech has a core here that's young, that has a chance to be very good. When you're seeing Ben Hammond do what he did against Syracuse, 21, 7-7 as a true freshman, when you see Tyler Johnson look like one of the best young all-around players in the conference, right, in terms of what he's been doing defensively and rebounding, and you see the offensive ceiling at times, you see the athleticism of the wall, there's some potential on this team. And then you see what Jaden Young's been doing, you're like, okay, this guy, even if he's like a sixth man or just like the seventh man in the rotation, he's coming off the bench, he's hitting a bunch of threes, and he's like that kind of guy for you, you know, that this is a core that's going to be really good for a couple of years if you can keep them around, right, with more experience. Hell, look, I mean, we've talked about this on this podcast all year. I mean, look at where this team was in November to where they are right now, and look at the growth. And most of the rotation guys are young.
It's even Wessler. It's
yeah.
Burnham got more comfortable. I know Burnham's going to be going, but it's just another example. Like the whole roster, Rechsteiner has improved. A little bit of a roller coaster ride, but he has improved and is playing some of his better basketball right about now. And so you want to keep as many of these guys together as you possibly can, because that's how you win. Guys need to know how to play with one another. And I know every team deals with transfers, but if you could keep 80% of the roster and then add in a few transfers to fill the holes, like this could be a tournament team next year. I firmly believe that. Like, we have overachieved so much since we lost our point guard before the season even started. I mean, we're doing this with no true point and a super young team, outmanned every game. Guys have the flu for the last like 7 games of the season. There's been a guy out with the flu. So it's just nuts. And if you can just spend a little bit of money and keep these guys together, it could be really exciting for next year.
How often have we said this year that this team feels like they're one shooter short, right? So whether that's Ivy Curry or whether it's Hyzier Miller, right? Like, it feels like this team has been one shooter short. And it felt the same way last year. You know, when Rodney Rice, you know, exited in the preseason, felt the same way. And I think Virginia Tech has an opportunity to kind of, number one, fix that, but then number two, keep a lot of these guys in the fold that are young, that have potential, and you have the chemistry, right? The chemistry of the roster. Mike Young has done his best work with rosters like this, right? Guys who have been able, this is how he built his rosters at Wofford, pre-NIL and all that. Young guys playing together 3-4 years. By the time they get to their junior or senior seasons, they're in the NCAA tournament and they're really, really tough out, right? Hit a million threes, play solid defense, very well coached, a team you don't want to see.
You have to develop it.
You have to develop it, though. So you bring in the NIL funds and you keep these guys in the fold, and I think there is opportunity to be very, very good.
So I think Ed and Billy are going to go into a little bit more detail on the NIL front tomorrow. So we're going to cut that conversation off there. But just to close it out on the men, upcoming schedule, we got UNC at home tomorrow, Tuesday, March 4th. And then we got on the road at Clemson on the 8th, and that will close out the regular season. I'm not optimistic about the Clemson game. I'm going to be straight up. They're a really good team. It's on the road. But UNC at home, if maybe the whole roster's not sick and we get everyone on the floor together at one time, that's not a great UNC team. And they need that game. They need the game in Blacksburg to go to the tournament. They are firmly on the bubble. And I'm actually kind of surprised they're as low in the Lenardi stuff as they are.
Yeah,
I
me
feel like
too.
they should be in, but they just don't have as much talent as they typically do at UNC this year. And that's a winnable game for us. And I would love to spoil their chances at the tournament. That would be great.
Would be really funny. Everybody's talking about, Mike Young and how poor the roster is in terms of NIL and all this stuff, and then they just step up and beat North Carolina on Senior Day. It would be very funny. Like it would be
funny.
it would be really full circle since the Jacksonville loss. It really would be.
And didn't Hubert Davis just sign like an extension or something? Was
Got
that
an
last year?
extension. He's got an extension that he signed within the last couple of weeks. It went public.
That's what it was.
And I guess he had signed it, I think, before the season or something like that. And they're trying to hire a new general manager and like revamp like the new front office structure with college basketball and college football too, of course. They're trying to revamp that.
DEF CON if we beat them.
It would be very funny
Tomorrow night.
It would be funny. Yeah,
it would be funny, and it's a great spot for Virginia Tech because we are at home and we have absolutely nothing to lose. We've already got 8 ACC wins, which is, I think, exceeded my most optimistic expectations, even if we had our full roster when we did our preview. And so we're playing with house money right now. We're not going to the tournament. We're not going to the NIT, but beating UNC would be a nice exclamation point on this season. I'll tell you that right now.
Would be.
So we're hoping for that. And then when it comes to the ACC tournament, if we get the UNC win or either of the last 2 games, we win one of them, we're probably going to be in that 9 seed, which would mean we skip the first round, which would be optimal. Now, we could potentially lose both and still be the 9 seed, but that's unlikely, I feel like, because there's 3 teams with the same record, 1 game behind us.
Yep.
So it's FSU, Pitt, and UVA. They could pass us, but we have a game on all 3 right now. So maybe beat UNC, you get to play, you get to save your legs for one day, and maybe you can make some noise because I think it's going to be Georgia Tech, right? If we're sitting at 9, we would play Georgia Tech at 8 because I think they're virtually locked into that spot.
Yeah, and you can have an opportunity for both the men and the women. I know we're going to talk about the women in a second to both end up playing Georgia Tech in the ACC tournament. So.
Yeah, 2 very different Georgia Tech quality of teams because the Georgia Tech women's team is pretty good.
They are.
Not so much for the men. Let's go to the women then. 18-11 now, 9-9 in the ACC with the completion of their regular season, and they're sitting at the 8th spot right now. So that's what we were talking about. They're set and they are ready to play Georgia Tech in that 8-9 game. I think that's going to be on Thursday at 1:30 p.m. But how they got there, they lost to BC in Conti. That's just doesn't matter. Men, women, even if we're playing football up there, it's usually not too fun. But they lost. But then we come back and we beat Clemson, a very solid Clemson team on the road. And this team, if they had been able to beat BC, and it was a close game, they lost 92-89, and they started off really bad. I think they gave up 32 points in the first quarter of that game, which is just silly. They bounced back, only gave up 11 in the second, and then the fourth quarter, I think it was back and forth the whole time. And we couldn't quite get there. There might have been a foul at the end. Correct me if I'm like speaking out of turn here. And then did it go to overtime? Yes.
It did. And the frustrating part about this too is the Rose Michaud ejection, right? Because I mean this is a game where you really needed her. And there was that whole first of all, Virginia Tech was kind of surprised she was thrown out of the game, which I was too. I mean, Rose was surprised she was ejected. It was kind of like, wait a minute, I'm out. It's like, okay, well, double tech, I'm out. They give her the flagrant 2 and she's out of the game. Weird, right? She was off to a really good start. She had 8 points in 12 minutes, and she was going to be a matchup nightmare for BC.
She had 8 and 6. Like she was like it was going to. If that doesn't happen, we probably win.
Right. And BC is just a very mediocre team this year, and they have no answers in the front court for a player like Rose Michaud. So it was just like very unfortunate circumstances. You hope that this isn't the case. Obviously, Virginia Tech winning on Sunday against Clemson was gigantic, but you're hoping this isn't the case. But You could go back and circle this and be like, that is what kept the team out of the NCAA tournament. That's going to be very, very frustrating.
A
Even
rogue ejection on Rose. Yeah, like that.
yeah,
Because this is what happened. So we had the lead up to with 11 seconds left. There was the foul on White. That ends up leading to overtime. We find ourselves down 3, and we got a couple good looks at it in
yep,
overtime, and
yep,
they just didn't fall. And if you looked at the boards, it was 48-38. Like, we got crushed on the boards, and that's largely because Rose wasn't there for a lot of it. Stupid fouls all over the place. I will say BC shot 21 free throws. Like, there was a lot of foul calls in this game. They made 17 of those 21, and BC had 6 girls in double figures. Now, Baker had a fantastic game. She continues to, like, you want to talk, it reminds me of Young, like a better version of Jaden Young with Baker,
yeah,
because like her ceiling is still so much higher. I mean, she's what she does
yeah.
as a true sophomore this year. Like, it's been so fun. 24-8, 3 and 2 in this game. Carly had 19, 6 and 2, Eck 15, 5 and 4. I mean, there was a lot of points. So there's a lot of stat lines that you can recite, but at the end of the day, we couldn't get the win. And it was unfortunate. So let's go to Clemson, because this was, our season is on the line. Our tournament hopes are on the line in this one. We led most of the way. We had a 5-7 point lead most of the fourth quarter, but in typical fashion, this also a young team lets Clemson back in. Evans hits that huge 3 for them with under a minute left, cut it to 2 after Nelson's layup. And we could not hit a shot to seal it. Like, we're up 2 and we just couldn't get the ball to go in the basket. And then it came down, like, after many reviews and all kinds of other crap that went on, Clemson finally missed the shot at the end, and we got the W. And so I would say my takeaway from this game is that I thought in both BC and Clemson, the ball has been moving so much better than it had in like the 5 games prior, in terms of
Yeah.
like the assist numbers and just the movement of the basketball and offense.
Yeah, the offense definitely played better. I think it was pretty clear, and Megan Duffy mentioned this after the game. Really important for Virginia Tech to have fouls to give at the end, because Clemson really couldn't get into what they wanted on the final shot. Virginia Tech kept fouling. I think they had like 3 fouls to give. They kind of kept fouling every time like Clemson wanted to get into something to get a look, to try to win the game. They really just couldn't get into it. And Virginia Tech really just stifled Clemson's offense down the stretch there in like the closing, whatever it was, 25, 30 seconds of the game. Just really made it hard for Clemson to get into a rhythm and get into what they wanted to do. So I thought that ended up being pretty important. I thought defensively, Virginia Tech was much, much better in this game, right, than they were against Boston College. This is a Clemson team that they're kind of on equal footing with BC. Very up and down season for Clemson. But I thought defensively, Virginia Tech played much, much better here. There weren't nearly as many fouls called in this game, right? BC hit 17 of their 21 free throws in that loss earlier in the week. Clemson only had 10 free throws in this game on Sunday, so it was a much smoother game, not as many free throws. But yeah, I thought Virginia Tech offensively played well. They were in a better rhythm despite scoring less points. I just thought it was a more free-flowing offense. I thought defensively it was much better. You talked about Karis Baker and how she played in the BC game. She hits all 4 of her 3-point attempts in this game too. They were all huge, just bucket after bucket. And you could tell that Clemson's defense too was really, really concerned about leaving her, right? Carly was able to get going downhill. Laney White had a good game getting downhill, and you could tell, and she had some big buckets down the stretch, but you could tell that like Karis Baker teams are thinking about her on the perimeter, which is the spacing with Virginia Tech's offense with Karis Baker on the floor continues to improve because she continues to knock down shots. So it's just something to watch. This team with the bracketology, their last team in right now, heading into the ACC tournament, or first team out. If they're first team out,
it depends on the one you look at. Like, they're right on there.
So they're right on the point being right on the bubble going into this Georgia Tech game. Obviously, Virginia Tech faced Georgia Tech earlier this season, and that was a huge game at the time. Virginia Tech came out, played very well, won that game. go in with the same game plan, I think you're going to have to win at least one and then maybe two in the ACC tournament to really feel good about it. But I think one probably gets you in the field. I think if you lose to Georgia Tech, you're probably not doing yourselves any favors after that BC loss. So you've got to pick up at least one in the ACC tournament, I think.
And that's the issue for them is the quality wins. They only have one Q1 win, does Virginia Tech. They're 4-2 against Q2 as of today, and they are 10-0 against Q4 teams. So that's nice because I think at one point they had a loss in there. But the neutral site games, like it's going to depend on like does it fall under a Q1, how the final things shake out. But right now, the quality wins is tough. If we beat Georgia Tech, I would feel pretty good about making the tournament. But to feel like we're going to get in, it's 2 W's. You got to win 2, and they can do it. Like they really can. If you run up against Notre Dame or somebody, like that's going to be a much taller task. But this team, with what they can do offensively, with as you talked about Karis and the way every girl is finding a way to like get the basketball out of their hands, get the assist numbers. Like Carly had 6 assists and 16 points against Clemson and just 1 turnover. I think Baker and Rose both had 17 and they both had 5 boards. And Matilda continues to rack up the assists. She's getting like 5 a game, like the last, 4 or 5 games. So everyone is so versatile. They're all kind of playing this like team basketball with no roles. It's kind of positionless basketball right now. And you also had Mackenzie Nelson come in.
She was awesome. Yeah, she was really
so good in that game. 14 points and 5 assists and 3 rebounds. And she's a youngster too. And so this team, if they could avoid those like periods of time where they're just making mental mistakes and maybe not playing with the highest motor, they can beat multiple teams in the ACC tournament. They really can, because there is so much more growth and they've grown so much over the season in a first year of a head coach too, which think about that challenge. Like at least Mike Young knew the lay of the land, knew what he's doing in Blacksburg. Like Duffy just got there and she's managed to improve this young squad significantly over the season.
Yeah, she's done a really nice job, and I think you see what this team can be in the future with her. She's obviously a very good coach. You haven't watched the women's team this year and looked at them and been like, yeah, this team's not well coached. Like, you just haven't felt that way. They've been playing hard. It's clear it looks different, right? The talent is not what it was under Brooks. Not to say it can't be. There are still very good players on this team. They have a very good recruiting class coming in, and a lot of the young players on this team were top recruits. So there's still plenty of talent. It's just there was going to be a regression, right? Because of who was leaving, right? You're losing Kitley, you're losing Amor. Like it was just going to look different, and it has. But Virginia Tech's looked good this year, right? Overall, by and large, you got to be pretty happy with how the season has gone, considering what they lost, new coach, all the turnover. Got to feel good about it.
9-9 in the most difficult conference in basketball. Yeah, in women's basketball. I mean, it's a slugfest every night in the ACC, and they went 500, which is what I had said in the preseason in our preview. I said they should go 9-9, and if they do, they'll be in the tournament. Now, that second part might not be true, but we will see what happens. You mentioned top recruits. Cale Peterson just did an interview with Billy Ray Mitchell that hit YouTube today. So if you want to hear a little bit more about one of our young up and coming players, check in with Billy and Cale. It was a really good interview. Seems like a great kid. My final note, you said the thing about Karis going 4 for 4 in the last game. She's now shooting 42% from 3 on the season.
Yeah, she's shooting the cover off.
She's balling, dude. Yeah. And Lonnie White's shooting 50%. Now it's less attempts than Karis, but like that is stretching the floor for this team.
Yeah.
And they can be dangerous offensively. And that Georgia Tech game, when we faced them earlier in the year, if memory serves, we could have beat them in regulation, but that was an overtime win. But we went down there and beat them in their own house. So I feel pretty good about the matchup on Thursday. I'm excited to watch that one.
Yeah, 105-94. That game was a couple months ago now, and Virginia Tech had all 5 starters scoring double figures in that game. So
And
Yeah, I feel good about it.
wasn't Georgia Tech undefeated at that point, or maybe they had one loss?
They
Yeah, undefeated.
were 15 and 0, 3-0 in conference play, and they were ranked 13th.
Yeah, that's probably our biggest win of the season. I know that they have like not played as well, and Cal's really good, right?
Yeah, Cal's good. Yeah,
Cal's
good.
really good. So maybe Cal's the best win, but either way, we can beat Georgia Tech. Is my point. We've already beaten them.
Yep.
We beat them in Atlanta. We can do it again. So make sure you tune in the game on Thursday. I don't have anything else, Mike. If you're all closed out over there.
All good on my end.
All right. So make sure you're subscribed to the Sons of Saturday YouTube channel, as well as the Sons of Saturday podcast feed. If you wanted any extra coverage, come on over to Two Deep. We had Ed on last episode, and Ed not only talked basketball, but he gave us some of his thoughts on the OC. Some very some good stuff that maybe me and Sam hadn't talked about prior. So that was interesting. It was good to get Ed talking on some other topics. He's got a lot to offer, just like yourself there, Mike.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it. And until next time, go Hokies.